Hello, my name is John Spoehr. I'm Executive Director of the Australian Workplace Innovation and Social Research Centre at the University of Adelaide, and it's great on behalf of the Adelaide Festival of Ideas to be chairing this session today with a wonderful speaker, Örjan, Sölvell. The theme of today is safety in clusters, and some of you may be wondering what exactly you're in for, but I can assure you it's a very, very important presentation that we have before us today, very much linked to how we might sustain, rejuvenate and build a robust South Australian economy going forward. So we're very privileged to have Örjan here with us today. This session is proudly presented in association with the South Australian Government. I acknowledge that today we are gathered on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationships with the land. We acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today, and we respect their elders past and present. About our speaker today, he comes to us with a distinguished international reputation. He's Professor of International Business at the Stockholm School of Economics and is Director of its Centre for Strategy and Competitiveness, I should say. Professor Sölvell has studied international competitiveness and clusters in various nations and regions and is Senior Institute Associate at the Institute for Strategy and Competitiveness at Harvard Business School. He's the Director of the European Cluster Observatory, the EU's website informing policymakers, practitioners and researchers throughout the world. The site informs people about European clusters and cluster policies. One of his most well-known pieces of work, co-authored with Mats Williams, is Building the Cluster Commons, and he's also well-known for his Cluster Green Book. Örjan has been working with the noted economist Michael Porter, who of course is known to many of us as one of the founding fathers, I can say, of competitiveness debates internationally, and has been a great advocate of clusters internationally since the 1980s and before, and that thinking has had a profound influence on South Australia, and I think it's very appropriate at this particular time in history to be revisiting that particular agenda. I know that the South Australian Government, policymakers at a national and state level are very interested in how we, as a state, can make the most of clusters as an important ingredient in economic and industrial rejuvenation. So if you could please join me in welcoming John Spoehr. Thank you.
Today is my first day in Adelaide. Great to be here. I guess you have been here for some time waiting for me. So. And I'm going to spend more than a week. And some of the people I met this morning, they gave me quickly a package to carry around today so people can see it. It's from Barossa Valley. So I'm already making a PR for one of your famous clusters. It supposedly is one of the 5 most well-known clusters in the world when it comes to wine. So actually I will go there on Sunday and Monday. I look very much forward to that. Today, yes, this is a festival of ideas, and you want new ideas. And I see it as my role to speak on 2 things, and it's around innovation, processes of innovation, how innovation happens, and also speak about clusters. And maybe for some of you the word cluster is a new one when it comes to industry and competitiveness and so forth, but I'll try to be clear on explaining how these clusters work. And I think for the future of not just Australia or South Australia, you need to think about innovation and clusters a little bit. It's not just about manufacturing plants. This is also about manufacturing, but it's not just about plants and markets. It's also about collaboration and clusters, and I'll try to explain that a little bit. But let's start with innovation, which is a very central theme, and I think in the old days when you were thinking as an economist about the economy and competitiveness, it had a lot to do with economies of scale and efficiency and so forth. Now it has turned much more into a debate around innovation. How do we create new products and new services and new business models in our economies? So the flexibility and change in innovation has become very, centerpiece of the debate. Of course, historically, there's always been innovation. There's been novelty that has created new firms, new industries all through. But today it's become very, very central. And I think one of the cases when it comes to clusters is, of course, Silicon Valley, which is the center of innovation around IT and so forth. So the cluster of clusters is really today Silicon Valley. And lots of politicians and business leaders, etc., go to Silicon Valley to emulate that model and bring it home. So I'll talk a little bit about that later on. Innovation is about people. It's about people coming up with new ideas and transforming those ideas into products and services that can create some sort of commercial value. The thing is, if you put 100 people or 100,000 people in a particular setting, you can get very few innovations and very few ideas. But if you put it in a different setting, the same kind of people, you get lots of ideas and you're going to get lots of innovations, new firms, new products, and new business models emerging. So the question is, what is the difference between these sets of environmental factors that really play such a big role? So it's about people. These people can be employed in large companies. They can be employed in small companies. They can be entrepreneurs. Innovation happens inside companies, but it also happens between companies. And there's a lot about debate about open innovation, how firms link up to other firms. And actually, the new ideas are sort of created in the meeting between people in different organizations. And it's not just between one firm and another firm, it's also between people in public sector meeting other people in firms, meeting people in the university and so forth. So it's a matter of linking up and connecting people across different types of actors in a society. And this is very, very crucial, but also very, very difficult, because the way we build society is that we have a university sector and we have a public sector, we have a private sector and so forth. And typically, the natural instinct is to stay at home and do whatever you do best at home, and you don't try to really link up to other people and collaborate a lot. And that's where we have to change our mentalities if you want more innovation happening in your region. Innovation involves two aspects. One is what I talked about, is sort of developing these new ideas as a novelty, the seed of innovation. But to really become not just any type of, let's call it invention, that can be a fantastic idea, when we talk about innovation, we also think about, does it lead to use and value? Usually when you measure the height or how big an innovation is, it's not how big the idea is, it's how big the use is, the value it creates. An example would be, some of you maybe today will Twitter from this session, we're listening to Professor Sölvell talking about innovation or something like that. Twitter is not a really great idea in terms of the seed. It's not a big new technology. It's not like it's like the steam engine or something like that. It's a very simple idea. But once they put that idea in Silicon Valley into a simple little service you can do via your phone or computer, it became enormous use, used by millions of people in creating values. You can just look at the value of stocks of companies like Google or Twitter and so forth and Facebook. Enormous value are created out of these rather simple technologies, as it were. So innovation is about both the seeds, the ideas, the novelties, but it's also about the use and the value it creates. And this is really the big puzzle. How do we create environments where actually all these ideas really become something? Because there are many places on Earth where there's a lot of good ideas. There's good research, there are people with ideas, but they are not transformed or translated into products and services and companies that develop value and use throughout societies. So that's the big trick. Here are some of the typical seeds you can think about. And I usually divide them into three parts. We have seeds. If you start from the left here, seeds of innovation coming from science. And a lot of companies thrive on co-locating to universities to get as much good stuff out as possible when it comes to new ideas, new knowledge out of science. And I mentioned some cases, GE Healthcare, Novartis, ABB, and so forth. Big companies, but also small companies. And this world has become more and more important. And there are many universities around the world who are also going to Silicon Valley in the sense they go to Palo Alto to go to Stanford, because Stanford early on said, we want to talk to industry. We want to open up our doors. We want industry to co-locate. They started, and this is now 60 years ago or more, back in the 50s in Stanford Industrial Park. And after some 5, 10, 15, 20 years, a lot of things started to happen when people from private sector, companies, industry, started to interact with researchers. And researchers taking leaves of absence to start a company and going back and forth. So this interaction is now envied by every university. And you have fantastic universities around the world, including the one that I've been to, Harvard, who have not understood how really to open up these doors. They're also trying. They're spending enormous amounts of money trying to build also a Silicon Valley next door to Harvard. But it's not that easy. It takes time, and they're spending a lot of money. They have the land. They bought all the land south of Charles River, basically. But to go from land to a Silicon Valley is a long way to go in getting these dynamics. And I think a lot of universities, probably also universities in this city, are thinking about how to open up and get interaction also with industry. So science is one part where you get seeds of innovation. Another part is, let's call it the classical entrepreneur. People, often without schooling, they have no university degrees, they are just people with lots of ideas. They come up with, like a Richard Branson or something like that. Or I saw yesterday when I came at the airport, the IKEA next door to the airport, right? So Ingvar Kamprad, a guy from the south of Sweden, developing an idea, no schooling basically, an idea of how to change furniture retail basically. And it took a few years, there had a lot of resistance, even to the extent that manufacturers of furniture in Sweden refused to deliver furniture to him because he was so radical in his ideas of changing this industry. So he had to turn to Poland in those days, and these were days when it was not easy to trade with Poland, to find producers of chairs and tables and so forth. So there are lots of entrepreneurs that come up with ideas, and often these ideas relate to some need, some idea. I have to solve this problem. My mother can't really read. She has problems with her eyes, and then the person develops some new technology to use computers to read and so forth. So there are lots and lots of these stories of entrepreneurs coming up with ideas, basically from nowhere. The thing is, out of 100 Ingvar Kamprads coming up with the idea of developing, changing the way you assemble furniture and sell furniture and so forth, maybe only 10 or 5 really become the companies you see. So there are lots and lots of these ideas, of course, that never turn into real to use and great value. The third one, which has become more and more important to large companies, particularly in sort of consumer products, everyday products, is to listen to the customer. That sounds a bit funny, don't you listen to your customers? Yeah, I know in many industries, not so much. End users, if you're producing, like Procter & Gamble is an example here. You produce lots of these products that you use all over the world. If you have millions and millions of users, probably they come up with ideas on how to improve the packaging or the quality of the product, or 1,000 different ideas. And if you don't have any system or way of listening to them, you just push your shampoo to the market, you will never get those ideas translated into innovation, improvement, etc. of your products. So now they're building systems in different ways to sort of listen to customers and customer ideas. So this is another way of picking up innovation seeds, is coming from the users. So these were some of the sources of innovation. But then is the big puzzle. How do we translate these ideas, the novel ideas, into new companies or new products and new services business models. And that is the trick. And there are many answers to the puzzle, and I point to two important factors. One is sort of the general regional conditions when it comes to the quality of labor and education, quality of research, quality of infrastructure, public transport, lots of things in sort of the regional context, which, depending on where you are on this globe, the regional context will differ from country to country, but also within Sweden or within Australia, you will have differences when it comes to the regional sort of qualities of infrastructure and so forth. So it often varies a lot also inside countries. The second, let's call it part of this equation, is clusters. I will use the idea of the Silicon Valley type of environments, and I'll try to explain how these Silicon Valleys work and how these clusters work. So first one, regional microeconomic condition. I won't go into detail, but it's a lot around how to build an attractive region and a competitive region that offers an environment where all these ideas of novelty can be turned into something real, into new companies and so forth. And if you have a lot of red tape in policies, it's difficult to start up a company or et cetera, you will not get any of these ideas out. And on the word, being safe in clusters or being safe, there is no safety around in the world, but you can be pretty sure that if you have a system, take one of the extreme systems like the Soviet Union, of course people had lots and lots of ideas, but these ideas could never be turned into anything because the system, the incentives, what we call the institutions, did not allow that kind of thinking or changing or improving in a small firm or in the large firm, in the public sector and so forth. You were supposed to do what you're supposed to do in an efficient way, but there was no room for innovation. So these conditions differ a lot. And you can just imagine, you don't have to take an extreme case like North and South Korea. You can just go to the south of the United States. On one side of the border, you have Mexican institutions, Mexican values, Mexican regional sort of infrastructure and institutions, as opposed on the other side of the river where it's American institutions, American values, American sort of regional framework conditions. And you can see the same people, the same money creates at least 5 times the value on one side of the river as opposed to the other side of the river. So these differences can be, you just put a border there and you can get enormous differences in the quality of these regional microeconomic conditions. The second one I call clusters, and for some of you this is a new concept, a new idea maybe. There are various ways of thinking about this, but the way we think about clusters is that you put in the middle private industry, firms, large firms, small firms, suppliers, consultants, manufacturers, different kinds of firms in a particular sector. It can be around automotive, it can be around pharmaceuticals, it can be around healthcare, it can be around consumer products and so forth. There are many different types of cluster in different types of sectors. But this is a center sort of on the stage. You'll think of the cluster as a stage, the actors on the stage. These I would put as the center actors on the stage. Around them you have research actors, you have specialized research institutes, you have the big universities and so forth, all kinds of research going on. You have education, everything from primary education all the way up to academic education of different sorts. That can be more general, it can be more specialized. And often what you see in clusters are that depending on what you have in the middle, some of these organizations and institutions around them will specialize. So if you go to Hollywood, you will see specialized education around being, a stuntman or a director or a scriptwriter and so forth. So you get a lot of specialization. This goes all the way back to Adam Smith writing about economics in the 18th century that, with specialization you can get more economies coming out of a particular region or a company. So education research is both general but also more specialized depending on the regional context and the clusters you have. You have capital providers of different sorts, and of course more and more venture capital is very hot when it comes to emerging industries and small firms and so forth. But there are different kinds of capital providers, and finally different types of public organizations. And I think it's very important to think about clusters not just as the companies producing particular services, like in Hollywood, the film and so forth, or if you go to Modena in Italy, you see the producers of the Maserati sports cars and so forth. But also think about the cluster stage as where you have actors from the public side, from the research side, education side, and the capital provider side. So all these interact. And the thing is, the more these interact, will be my story here, the more innovation you will get, the higher the likelihood that these ideas will be turned into real products and services in use and creating commercial value. So really going from the idea to the seed, to the fruit, so to say, the innovation, these characteristics are very, very important. So I show this by putting up this again. It's about people doing their thing, but also about people, as we call it, walking the bridges a little bit across these different types of actors. I guess I was supposed to give a good case from Australia. I didn't. I brought another one, which is surfing in the United States on the West Coast, and there are many surf paradises in the world. There are some here I know in Australia. There are also surf clusters there's even surf clusters in Europe, actually. I don't know if anyone here is surfing, but there are surf clusters also in Europe. If you go down to the northern part of Spain up there on the coastline in the Basque Country, you have in San Sebastian, for example, surf beaches and surf clusters with a number of manufacturers and specialists around surfing. So I'll give you an example of what a cluster looks like, and I'll use this one, the Santa Cruz Surf City cluster. So in the middle we have the surfboard makers producing surfboards. And around them you have different kinds of components coming into it, chemicals, foam, etc. You have retail, clothing, other sort of related industries around this. University and education, some of it specializing in some of these technologies around surfing. Festival of ideas or festival of surfing. You might have a surfing museum, even though I always warn when I talk to politicians, you should be a little bit wary with the museum, because a museum in a sense is kind of telling the world that we used to be very good at doing this. So now we have a museum. I even think once I managed to stop actually a museum in Sweden because it was a cluster that wanted to build a museum, and I think after listening to me they said maybe we shouldn't because we want to go into the next phase of this industry, and maybe the museum stage is not the right stage. It's great to go to museums, particularly if you want to look into history, but if you're interested in the future of your industry, maybe that's not the right institution there. But even I have big respect for, I've been myself on the board of a big museum in Stockholm. Schools and clubs, associations, lobby groups, there are cluster organizations and so forth that sort of surround this to build sort of what we call institutional thickness around this, which is very important to enhance competitiveness of a particular sector. Media, surf heroes, and so forth, and even that it brings in skateboards, snowboards, other types of products, but that has some sort of relatedness when it comes to technologies and so forth. So often we should go into, if you sort of fly around the world and you zoom in, because when you fly at 10,000 meters, you don't see a lot. You see railways, you see factories and so forth. They look pretty much the same. But when you zoom in and you go down, you start to see these things happening in any Silicon Valley type of environment that you are interested in. So just to summarize, the way I see the cluster is then, of course, obviously all these actors on a stage, and clusters can be going up, they can be going down, they become thinner, they can become thicker, depending on where you are in your sort of evolution here. And of course, if you have a cluster, probably you want this to develop, such as Barossa Valley here. Unfortunately, there's not even a bottle inside here. I was actually, I thought, oh, can I get a bottle of wine? No, there's more like a brochure in here or something. It's a very good PR thing there, right? So if you have a cluster, you need these kind of things. I think of a cluster as like this picture. It's like a commons. You know, you do your own thing. You have your own turf. Public policy have their turf, and the universities have their turf, and the companies, the large and the small, have their own turfs. But somehow there is space in between these actors, and that's what I call the commons. Some place where you can meet, get new ideas, go from the idea to actually commercialize the idea. You need to meet people with money. You need to meet people with other ideas. You need to meet customers that are sophisticated and so forth. And all of this doesn't happen if this is a minefield or if it's full of big gaps, holes. So if you start a walk, you're going to fall into a big hole and you never come back again. So you need to feel a bit of trust, a bit of a mental model that it's okay to meet people in university. It's okay to meet people in companies. It's okay to meet people from the public sector, etc., in this whole game. And that's what I think of it as building a commons. I don't know if that works here in Australia, but I imagine you have a lot of commons as well here. So here we are, global competition, global value chains, you know, digital economies, information. That's the sign. It means I have 10 more minutes. Everything's, you know, surrounding the world, traveling at high speed at no cost, etc. I mean, that's part of reality. It's becoming more and more global. But the odd thing, and this is kind of a paradox almost, the more global the world becomes, the more local it becomes. It's not that global means that you kill local. Local goes out the door because it's global. The thing we see is that the more global, the more things can move around the world, the more they want to move to particular locations. If people are free to move and get a job anywhere, which is not true, it's partly true in Europe, you can actually shift countries easily, but there are lots of barriers of all kinds for people movement. But when it comes to capital movement and information movement, internet, etc., it's very, very global. The thing is, even if IT is global or information is global, somehow there is something going on that makes Twitter become a fantastic innovation in Silicon Valley. Twitter is not from Michigan. Twitter is not from Stockholm. Twitter is not from Adelaide. But I bet in Adelaide there are many people that develop probably ideas that would be like a Twitter idea. There were people developing some of these ideas also in Michigan or in Helsinki. I even have a good case that I often use because actually there was a company called Jaiku in Helsinki that was exactly this idea. But somehow Jaiku in Helsinki was not in the cluster and had these regional framework conditions I talked about and cluster conditions where it could go from the idea to a real product used by millions and millions of people. But Twitter was in the right spot, Jaiku in the wrong spot. And that's exactly what you see happening today. Nokia being in the wrong spot, Google and Apple being in the right spot. And these spots change over time. But that makes a big, big difference, not just for small little companies like Jaiku with, I don't know, 5, 10 employees, also for a big company like Nokia. It has an enormous impact on their potential of competing in the business of, we were supposed to turn off our phones, and that goes very, very fast. It's not a matter of 10, 20, 30 years. It's a matter of 5 years. So this is very, very tricky in the global economy. But these nodes are very, very important. And if you want to be an innovative firm, not just a producer of something in a global value chain, but part of something where you create new products and services constantly, you should probably think about this idea of clusters. Sports cars, mobile phones, film, etc. You can go across industries, handicraft type of industries, process industries, manufacturing industries, service industries, advertising here and there, financial industry, London City, Wall Street. I mean, you see them all over the place. So I will try to use quickly a few minutes just to say, can we build then clusters? Let's say that these clusters are sort of so critical to innovation. And we think we want innovation in our part of the world. Can we build them? And there's a whole scale from saying, like New York Wall Street, it's a very natural phenomenon. It's something that just happens, to very strict, heavy hand saying, we will have cluster X in this part of the town, which is kind of, I put another extreme example. Putin said we can have a world-leading financial center here in Moscow. Bang, and you decide on, here's a plot of land. And then you start to build some skyscrapers, and you say, this is the financial center of the world. The idea of see, that's the mobile phones. The idea of creating a plot of land is rather easy. It's very difficult to go from a real estate kind of idea in terms of policy in this to creating a Silicon Valley or creating a Wall Street, of course. But it's not hopeless. We say that often there is room in between these two extremes, let's call them. There is room for innovation policy, regional policy, economic development policy, and cluster policies in any part of the world. And that's what we try to study in different parts of the world. And as you mentioned, on the couple of the books I've written on this is around how you can initiate clusters and get some more sort of, what I call it, putting a turbo onto this engine a little bit, getting some more power, some more force out of the dynamics of these environments. And that can be done in a rural setting, it can be done in an urban setting, it can be done basically everywhere. It's about people, particularly walking the bridges and getting an idea of, we should do something here. And the best start is usually that you have a big crisis. You see something is going down the drain, we are really losing competitiveness. Then usually people from different actors on this stage dare to meet other people and really talk about important things, not just having sort of general dinners, but actually talking about how do we do something with this region in the future? How do you do something with this cluster in the future? And I was supposed to go around, and I will do this very quick now, sorry for that, some of the experience we've had with how, building these clusters. And I'll point to 6 things to this. The first one, which is really the center part, is about bridge building. I think I hinted about that. It's a matter of getting people to meet across these different islands, as it were. And that sounds very easy, but the matter is that people in academia, and I'm in a university professor, so I'm supposed to, study, write my papers and publish and so forth. Not supposed to get my hands dirty talking to industry. But I think some people dare to walk these bridges and build these bridges, and that's very, very crucial because it's not just about doing your own thing, it's also about collaborating or interacting with people. You get lots of ideas. If you want to have good ideas for research, you should meet people in industry or people in public sector or people in healthcare or whatever. You get lots and lots of ideas for your research. And if people in healthcare meet people from research, they also get ideas of how you can improve things and so forth. So there's a lot that can happen as you just open up the door a little bit and start to meet people on the other side. There are lots of barriers to this collaboration. You don't have any knowledge, you don't know who is on the other side, you don't have any networks. If you call someone up, they don't call you back. There is no language. You speak different languages, you have different norms and attitudes. There's so many things that keep you apart. That you need a lot to sort of break this, but that's what I call it's like a minefield. It's like big of holes and gaps out there. So you need to build across that. And these, what I call sort of the Bob the Builders, like this woman or man, it's both male and female, are very, very crucial, daring to build and to walk these bridges and take people out there. I'll jump a little bit, sorry for this. So we're going to have time for Q&A. It's easier if you have something to start from, building from strength. Of course, you don't always have a Silicon Valley to start from. There might be, just a few companies or just a few small companies, or there's no really research going on and so forth. Of course, it's easier to put a turbo onto an engine, sorry, if there is an engine, but sometimes I will also see clusters and cluster initiatives starting from a rather small base, developing something into the future. So it's a matter of people getting the idea and the energy and vision of we should do something here. It's also more, if you want to be a bridge builder, if you want to go out there and interact between the systems, it's easier if you have some sort of neutral position. It's more difficult if you say, I'm here from industry to build bridges, or I'm here from government to build bridges. So often we talk about creating separate cluster organizations that have a mix of public financing and some private financing and so forth that you can build from let's call it a neutral position. I will skip funding and so forth. It's also good if your ministers or your political leadership shows some commitment, saying we believe that we should get more collaboration going in our region. We believe there should be more linkages across. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for all these initiatives taken by private business leaders or people in academia, whatever it comes from, unless there is some sort of political commitment to this. You need managers or people involved in this that can build and walk bridges. And usually when you start this, find some low-hanging fruit, something where you can get, because if you say the results will be in 10 or 15 or 20 years, it's going to be very, very difficult. You probably need something where you can show within 2 or 3 years something happened. It could be, for example, let's say you want to open up, you say we have this traditional industry here, they have difficulties in attracting young people to come to their industry. Maybe you can set something up with the education sector to improve the interest, whatever, in this type of industry, and start to work between schools at some level or university and the companies. And you can show some sort of results rather quick. Is a good way to make peace. Otherwise, people give up. It takes too much. Because this is no quick medicine. It's not that you fix a cluster. You don't fix a Silicon Valley in 6 months. It's, as I said, even Stanford opened up their doors in the 1950s, and it took about 20 years before anyone talked about Silicon Valley as something that really started to happen. So this takes decades, but it's a long-term work, and it's something you're building your future when you're building these things. But you need some quick results also to show that there's something in this little pie that is a good taste, like in this apple pie here. So I won't talk about that. I will just finish up by saying it's about building bridges, looking at what you have your strength in your region, some neutral actors, political commitment, having people actually building and walking bridges to create some traffic, and finally looking for some of the low-hanging fruits. You can get some of your clusters going. The question was, are you safe in clusters? You're never safe. There is global competition, and even big companies like Nokia forced to sell out their handset business to Microsoft for a tiny sum compared to what Nokia was used to be one of the top brands in the world. So, but to be on the left side or right side, I would say you're more safe if you're on the right side, because the left side is the old way of thinking of sort of the one company towns, the big factory, and it controlled the whole society in that town, which is sort of, let's call it a Soviet style type of setup. And it's very good for economies of scale, efficiency, but it's not good for innovation. And if you think innovation is the future, you need to be on the right-hand side. You're more safe when you have this diversity of different actors. And you're even more safe if you can get some of the linkages going and people meeting and some of the bridges. You're creating the commons rather than having just these actors living separate lives as sort of isolated silos or islands. And even more safe, most safe if you think of those clusters also being part of a regional context when it comes to social life, everything from daycare to parks and public transport to make your region attractive. Has to do with infrastructure, has to do with the science-based education, some of these general things that varies from region to region to region. So you're building both at the regional scale and at the cluster scale. So with that, I hope you got some ideas around innovation and clusters. Thank you very much.